So the first thing that I recommend with the bot is using multiple time frames, obviously. If you guys have access to a higher tier on TradingView, you only need access to the Pro Plus to do what I'm doing. That's what I'm using right now is the Pro Plus tier, which is not that expensive. And there's a lot of tricks to get a discount on TradingView. You can do the free trial, and then towards the end of the free trial, they'll give you discounts. You can sign up to TradingView, and then when you go to cancel, you can say that it's too expensive, and they'll usually give you a discount. So it's not very hard to get access to multiple charts at one time. So if you guys do have access to that, I recommend using 4 different time frames, but looking at the same ticker. Okay, so like we're looking at Tesla right now. I have Tesla on all of my charts, but they're different time frames. Okay, we have a 5-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute daily. Now, when you're trading stocks, these are the time frames that I recommend: 5, 15, 30 daily. If you're trading altcoins or like crypto, for example, if we were trading Bitcoin, you could use like 15-minute, 1 hour, 4 hour, and daily. You'd have to go a little higher on these because it is 24/7. Okay. So those are the time frames that I recommend. Obviously, you can use any 4 time frames. I recommend just spreading them out a little bit. You don't want to use like a 1 minute, a 3 minute, a 5-minute, a 15-minute. Like that's not really going to help you. You want to spread them out, starting from smallest to largest. Okay. Let's go back to Tesla. And let's put these back to what I like: 5-minute, 15, 30, and daily. Okay. So the first little tip that I recommend doing, or I guess that was the first tip. The second tip would be doing what we call the waterfall technique. So what I mean by waterfall is because the lower time frames are faster, right? They will signal much quicker than the higher time frames. Okay. So you'll get a lot more buys, you'll get a lot more sells. And when the trend is reversing, they will always be the first to show that reversal. Okay. So what I recommend doing is when you see let's say a daily breakout, right? We have a daily breakout here and Tesla is running really hard. So we're very bullish. If we were looking for kind of where this was topping out or where it's going to lose momentum, we would go down to the lower time frames and wait for those sell signals to come in, because that would mean that it's starting to lose momentum, right? So if we look at Tesla today, we had a little bit of a breakout, and then it pulled back and it gave us a sell signal, but then it flipped into a buy signal. Okay. So this pullback was very weak because it didn't make its way to the other time frames. All right. So like if we see a 5-minute sell, we want to wait for the 15-minute sell. We didn't get that. And then the 5-minute flipped back into a buy. So when this flipped back into a buy, that was at 11:45, which was right here. So that little pullback did not create a sell on the 15-minute. So that told you that that pullback was extremely weak. You were only able to get a sell signal on the 5-minute. If this was a strong pullback, it would have started on the 5-minute, then it would have went to the 15, then it would have went to the 30, and then it would have went to the 1 hour, so on and so forth, right? It would have waterfalled into the other time frames. It did not do that here. So if you were long Tesla and you started to see the 5-minute sell, unless you were like scalping this on a very small time frame, the 5-minute sell would not have worried you very much because it instantly got flipped back into a buy because the 15-minute held. Okay. But let's say if you're on like you're doing like a swing trade, maybe you have a kind of a bad entry, maybe you got in too late. Then if it flips into a 5-minute sell, that's probably going to be a little worrying because maybe you're actually going into a losing position. All right. So you do have to be a little patient sometimes and kind of wait to see how it's going to react on the other time frames. All right. Another example of that is if you're looking for an entry, let's say you missed the initial breakout. So we had this massive move up on Tesla on the daily, and we missed, let's say we missed the initial move. Then we can use this flip signal here as a re-entry point, okay? Because we know that the 15-minute is still in a buy. We know the 30-minute is still in a buy. We know the daily is still in a buy. So when we get a sell signal on the 5-minute, that's kind of like, okay, now we just need to wait for the buy, and then it's re-entering that uptrend, right? So the 5-minute turns into a sell, then it flips into a buy. So that could have been a re-entry point if you would have missed the initial trade. All right. Another example is, let's see, this would be easier on Bitcoin. Another example is like, okay, so we have a big daily uptrend right here, right? And then we have this nasty little pullback on Bitcoin. So if we go down to the other time frames, let's change these to our crypto time frames. We were getting a, where is that actually? That's on October 21st. That's way back here. October 21st is right here. Okay. So on the 4-hour, this nasty little pullback on the daily actually waterfalled all the way up to the 4-hour. So you didn't have a daily sell, but every time frame up to the 4-hour did give you a sell. This was a pretty deep pullback, right? But then if we go even higher, let's say we go to the 8-hour. Okay, we have a sell signal. Let's go to the 12. Okay, we have a sell signal. But then if we go to the daily, there is no sell signal. Okay, so if you took this trade on a daily time frame and you have a pretty decent entry, that would have scared you a little bit because you're giving away your profit, but it never turned into a sell on the daily. So your trade is actually still valid. Okay, and if you're in that trade, and let's say when you first took the trade, let's say like we took the trade somewhere around here, right? And we got in the trade a little late, so maybe we didn't get in the amount of size that we really wanted, right? So we have the waterfall technique showing us that we're pulling back pretty deeply all the way to the 12-hour. But then once that flips back into a buy, once again, like I said earlier, that could be a re-entry point. So if you're already in a trade and maybe you didn't get the size that you wanted, but now we're flipping back into buy signals on those other time frames, you could add on to your position, right? Another technique to add on to positions, maybe if you're not in the size that you like, is when the bot puts in take profits, these take profits are determined on support and resistance levels. Okay, so when the bot is finding a support and resistance that is actually holding and it's creating a top or a bottoming pattern, that's when the bot's like, okay, here's a take profit point. If you would like to take some money off the table, it doesn't mean fully close your trade. It just means that if you would like to take some money off the table, you can. So another good re-entry point is when you determine a take profit and it finds this zone. So like there's like a zone of resistance here, right? But then the take profit is broken. So you have like a momentum break of the take profit, which is a resistance level, right? So the basics of trading tells you like you break a resistance, you turn it to support. Same thought process here. When you break the take profit, that level turns into a support. Okay? So like we have like a little resistance here around this area, but then when you pull back, you can see the buyers are stepping in kind of above that take profit because that area is now support, right? So those breakout points of take profits are also re-entries, okay? Now, I would typically only use that technique if the take profit point is creating kind of like a flat zone of support or resistance. If it does something like this, those are a little harder to take because this take profit was a little bit late. The resistance is actually right here. This take profit is a little late. Okay, So you want to understand where is the resistance level or the support level when those take profits are coming in. If the take profits are a little late, you have to understand that. So like this would be the breakout level, not this. Okay. Because that is the resistance. This is the late take profit. The only time the bot's going to do that, it's going to give it to you a little late, is if it like puts in their level, like the support or resistance, and then it immediately bounces off of it. Because the bot is designed to wait for a few candles as confirmation. So if it bounces very quickly, the bot's going to be a candle or two delayed. So just understand that those points can be re-entry points. All right. Okay, another example of the waterfall method is, so this, you see how this buy signal came in a little late? Oh, it's actually still a very good buy. Let's see, how much is it up? You're about 30%, about 40% on the high. It is a little late though. Like if you wanted to catch this bottom perfectly, obviously the daily is going to be a little late because it waits for more confirmation. But if you want to use the waterfall technique, you could have gotten in this a little earlier, and I'll show you how. So the daily gave you the buy signal on October 1st. Okay, so let's go down to the other time frames and see where that buy signal came in. So what is the price on the buy? The buy is 48,200. On the 4 hour, it is 43,300. So it is a little, or actually a lot earlier. The 4 hour is about $5,000 earlier. Okay. And then let's go down even more. Let's go down to a 1 hour. And let's see, October 1st is way back here. The 1 hour is at 42,300. So it's even a little lower. And then once again, you go down to the 15 minute. I don't know if it'll let me go down this far. Let's see. October 1st, right here. So this buy signal would have came in around 43.6. So it seems like most of the low time frames were giving you a buy somewhere around 43,000, while the daily was giving you a buy at 48,000. Okay. So the way you could have played this if you were watching the charts like at the time on the day of October 1st or September 30th is you would have seen that low time frame signal come in, so maybe the 5 minute, and then the 5 minute would have went into a 15 minute buy because the buyers were getting very strong. Then the 15 would have turned into a 30. Then the 30 would have turned into a 1 hour. Then the 1 hour would have turned into a 4 hour. Okay? You guys get what I'm saying? So it would have been slowly but surely waterfalling onto the higher time frames. And if you're in that trade, let's say like you have a trigger on the 30 minute. You're like, okay, I don't want to take the 5. I don't want to take the 15. Those are a little too early. I'm going to wait for maybe a 30 or a 1 hour. So once the 30 minute or the 1 hour triggers the buy and you take that as your signal, you're basically just playing the waiting game at that point to see if either your stop loss has been hit or you are getting buy signals on the higher time frames. And as it gives you buy signals on the higher time frames, you want to move into that time frame. Like you want to be using that time frame as your justification for the trade. So you might have started out on a 30 minute, but now it's giving you a 1 hour. So now you want to use the 1 hour as your main time frame. Okay. Then the 1 hour goes into a 2 hour. Okay. Then you want to be using the 2 hour as your main time frame, and so on and so forth, right? So as it builds up to the higher time frames, that is the time frame that you use as your signal. Meaning, let's say you got it on a 30 minute entry, which was, what do we say, around 43,000. So it would have been somewhere down here. But now the daily buy came in. So we're well in profit now. We're doing very well. But because we have a daily buy, we know that we're safe for the most part. Sometimes this can be wrong, but for the most part, we know that we're safe to hold on to this. And we can let this daily begin to run. So now that 30-minute entry that you got turned into a massive play because it waterfalled onto the higher time frames. Okay. And if it doesn't waterfall into the higher time frames, let's say it starts at a 30 and then it goes to all the way up to the 4-hour, but then the 4-hour starts to nuke and you don't get that buy signal and it gives you a sell. That is when you want to start realizing that your momentum is gone. Your momentum is losing, right? You're losing it. So for the most part, hopefully at that point you would already be in profit. And if you are in profit, you can use that higher time frame sell signal as a way to get out of your trade. So if you started the trade at a 30-minute and it builds its way up to the 4-hour, but then it doesn't flip into a daily and you start losing momentum, you can use that 4-hour as an exit. Okay. Or you could go back to the lower time frames, say go back to the 2-hour or the 1-hour and use those as exits. But I would recommend staying with the highest time frame that gave you a signal. Okay. So the waterfall technique can be used in to find reversals, like I just went over, and it can also be used as re-entry points when it's pulling back on the trend. Okay. So basically, during the entire run up on Bitcoin on the daily, you would have seen a lot of sell signals on the lower time frames because you started getting choppy, you started having these nasty little red candles. The lower time frames would have definitely been giving you sell signals on this 1 month run. But if you were following the daily, you would have been in a long only mentality and you would have been only waiting for the buy signals. You would have not been looking at the sell signals on the lower time frames. So when the 4-hour gave you that sell signal, but then it flipped back into a buy, that is a long entry, not a or that is a good pullback entry, I should say. Okay. You guys have any questions about the waterfall technique before I move on? It's very simple once you watch it play out. If you just like start with a low time frame, start with a 5-minute or a 15-minute on anything that you want to trade. Like take like Phantom for example. They had a pretty big run today. If you just watch this on the low time frame, begin to waterfall into the higher time frames, it becomes very simple. So we start seeing the 15-minute get the buy, then we start seeing the 1-hour, then we start seeing the 4-hour, then we start seeing the daily, right? It will go from lowest to highest, right? And even the daily will waterfall into the weekly. Right? If you want to play like the really high time frames, it will do the same thing on the weekly. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to move on. The next tip that I recommend on the bot is just using other indicators as confluence with your signals, right? And some of the easiest indicators that you can use are moving averages, because moving averages are like the simplest indicator in trading that will help you determine trends, right? They'll help you determine if you're uptrending, if you're downtrending, if you're not trending at all, if you're going sideways. So I recommend using moving averages with the bot. I almost even coded in moving averages to give them to you with the bot, but I wanted to keep it really clean and just let you guys use your moving averages that you determine. But the numbers that I recommend using with the bot for shorter time or the faster moving average I would recommend is the 80 MA. The middle one I would recommend is anywhere from the 21 to like the 24. And then the farther out one would be the 50. And then if you want to use like a really far out one, I would use the 200. Okay. But it really doesn't matter. Whatever your preference is, use whatever works for you. For the most part, moving averages are all going to give you relatively the same trends as long as they're relatively the same number, right? It doesn't matter if you use a 7, an 8, a 9, or a 10. They're all going to give you relatively the same trend. Okay. What I do recommend is using at least 2 or 3 and spreading them out. Okay. So if you use like an 8, that is your short term. Then you want to use like a midterm, so like a 20. Then you want to use something that's like a little farther out, like a 50. And then if you want to use something really far out, which I typically don't use very often, would be the 200. So if you have at least 2 or 3, just make sure to spread them out. Okay. The other indicators that I recommend using with the bot are VWAP and volume, obviously. I recommend using those indicators with pretty much any kind of trading. But especially on low time frames, it will help you determine when the momentum is shifting into a buy side or a sell side. And it will help you determine which way the waterfall is going to go. Is it going to go to the sell side? Is it going to go to the buy side? Right. What I like to use on crypto is the 15-minute. What I like to use on stocks is the 5-minute with VWAP. And typically, when the waterfall is starting to go very bullish, you'll be consistently trading above the VWAP on the 5 and 15-minute. Okay. So when you are consistently trading above the VWAP, that's when you want to be looking for those buys on the waterfall technique. So if you start getting the buys on the 5-minute or the 15, then you start going on to the 30 and so on and so forth, right? But very often, if you trade heavily above VWAP, you will be giving those buy signals on the higher time frames. Okay. Now, the bot doesn't take into account VWAP, so it is good to throw it on your chart as a little confluence. The other indicators that I recommend using are volume profile. So especially on the higher time frames. If you guys watch my volume profile videos, you already know how I use it. But for the most part, basically what you want to be looking for is the big nodes. So like on the daily, if the bot is in a buy and you're starting to break resistance nodes, so like Phantom, for example, you're breaking out of this little node that we put in. So like if this wasn't in a buy, let's say this was in a sell, maybe on a lower time frame, and then you start to break out of this node and it gives you a buy signal, let's say somewhere around here, this would be a very good buy. Okay. Typically the buy signals that come in on the bot when you're breaking volume nodes, they are very high strike rate buy signals. Or kind of like in this instance here, if you are building a node and creating a POC, so like maybe you're going sideways for a long time and you're creating a POC, when the bot begins to, or when price begins to push away from that POC, let's say we got a buy signal somewhere around here, that is also a very high strike rate buy. Kind of like what happened right here. We put in a POC, had a massive node start to form, and then when we start to push away from that node, it will typically give buy signals. Now, I will say there's one little tip for this technique. A lot of the times when it's doing this, you're in a nasty range. So you could be getting buys and sells quite often. And you typically do not want to use the bot in a ranging market. So what I will say, if you're using this technique, like doing the POC buy, I would wait for it to really start to push off the POC. Don't just immediately blindly follow the buy signal. Wait for it to start to push off of the POC or push off of that node. Okay, so like for example, in this instance, I would have ignored it while it was chopping out here. Because you're ranging already, you do not want to trade the chop. But when it started to get a lot of momentum and it started to push away from the POC, that's when you would have said, okay, now we can respect the buy signal. Okay, so it gave you the buy pretty early, and if you would have respected this buy signal, you would have actually gotten a better entry, but it's going to be a lower probability trade. If you want more confirmation, you want to wait for it to begin to push off the volume node. Okay, you don't want to just blindly follow the bot when it's ranging, excuse me. When the bot is, or when price is ranging, the bot is going to have a much lower strike rate than if it's trending. Okay. Like if it turned into a sell signal here and then it flipped back into a buy signal, that buy signal would have a very high strike rate because you're in a strong trend. But if it gave you a sell signal like it did here, and then it immediately gave you a buy signal, that buy signal would not have a high strike rate because you are ranging. So understand that it's a trend bot, not a range bot. Okay, it is not a scalping bot. Scalping bots will do better in ranges than trend bots will. Okay. Another tip for volume profile. Let me see if I can find any examples. Let me grab the value area of this range here. Let's see what it looked like. So another example is if like we're finding balance. So it's kind of the same as the last example, but a little more in depth. If we're finding balance, which is kind of creating like a D-shaped profile, typically D-shaped profiles, you want to be selling the highs and buying the lows, right? But if the bot is giving you a buy signal when you are breaking the value area high, and that signal is generated by a lot of volume, let's say there's a decent volume breakout here, then I would respect that buy signal. That would basically be a breakout of balance. You're finally breaking away from the balance. Okay. If it's giving you a buy signal, but there's not a lot of volume, and then maybe it starts to chop out kind of outside the value area, then most likely that signal is going to fail. But if it gives you a decent amount of volume and you're pushing away from the value area and you have that buy signal, then that's a buy signal that will have a higher strike rate. Another example would be like if we had a lowercase b shape. So typically on a lowercase b shape, you want to be selling the highs and you want to be careful buying the lows because it's a bearish profile, right? So if the bot is already in a sell signal for the most part, because you're going to be downtrending, and then it gives you like say a buy signal down here, and then you start to flip, and then it gives you a sell signal when you start to lose this. If you're in a B shape, you want to respect that sell signal more than the buy signal, right? Because you want to be selling the highs more than you want to be buying the lows. Okay, that's how you want to be tying together volume profile with the bot. Understand what kind of profile you're in and respect the bot signals in whatever that profile is. Okay, so if you're in a P shape, you want to be respecting the buy signals on the bot more. If you're in a lowercase b, you want to be respecting the sell signals more. And then if you're in a D shape, you have to be watching out for where the volume breakouts are. Like if it's breaking the value area low with good volume and it's giving you a sell signal, that will probably work out. But if you don't have a lot of volume outside the value area, then it's most likely going to fail. Okay. Okay, the other indicators, let me see if I can get rid of this. There we go. The other indicators I recommend using, and watch your eyes when we go back to my white chart here. I recommend using the Momo, obviously, and I recommend using the Oasis Trading Suite. Now, there's a little tip for the Oasis Trading Suite. If you put it on the same chart as the bot, it will bug out. TradingView does not like if you have multiple indicators that color candles on the same chart. They typically make each other bug. So if you want to use the Oasis Trading Suite, I recommend putting it on another chart, kind of like how I have it, and then you have the bot on another chart. Okay, just don't combine them. You can combine them. They will still work. It will just bug out a little bit. But if you have multiple charts, just put the OTS on one of them and then don't put the bot on that one. And the way you use them together is the candle coloring on the bot and the OTS are not the same. They use different formulas, completely different formulas. So if both of them are coloring your candles green or red, meaning you're in an uptrend or a downtrend, that is going to give you a higher probability that that trend is strong, okay? So watch out for the candle coloring. It will definitely help. And if you are using the OTS as well, watch the pivots, okay? The take profit points on the bot, they like to find support and resistance levels, but they use a completely different formula than the pivots. Okay, so if you're, let's say, let's take Bitcoin for example. Bitcoin, we know, is trending very well. We're in a very strong trend here. If we were looking at the OTS, let me pull it up here. My chart's a little messy. Let me hide all this. If we were looking at the OTS, we could use these pivots as kind of points that we could take profit with the bot. Okay. The pivots are one of my favorite places, one of my favorite indicators to use for take profits. I prefer the pivots over the take profits on the bot. So if you're in a buy signal on the bot here, and you begin to top out a little bit on the pivot, that would give you a point where you could say, okay, maybe I could take some off the table here. I could take a little bit of profit. Okay. Another method with the pivots that you could tie in with the bot. Let me hide these other indicators real quick. Another method is the OTS trail. So the OTS trail is going to help you determine if you're in an uptrend or a downtrend. Okay. So what I've found is buy signals that come in above the OTS trail are a much higher strike rate than buy signals that come in below the trail, and vice versa for sells, right? Sells that come in below the trail, meaning a red trail, by the way. Sell signals that come in below a red trail are going to have a higher strike rate than sell signals that are coming in above a trail, if it was green or red, okay? Finally, another technique you could use is, let's say, you see how we have this pivot back here on July and August, and then you have a red to green shift on the OTS. So let's say we shifted green on the OTS on July 23rd. Okay, let's go to the bot. And let's see, when did we buy? The bot bought on July 24th. So just one candle later. You actually shifted green sooner. You shifted green 2 days sooner, but you bought a little later. The way you could have tied these together is, we know there's a pivot here. So we know this is a support area. So we can start looking for those buy signals on the lower time frames. Okay. The daily has a pivot, so we can go down to the 4 hour, the 1 hour, any of the lower time frames, and begin to use the waterfall technique. Okay. So this is gonna be hard to show because it's so far away. I think it'll only let me go down to like the lower time frames, like the 4 hour and the 1 hour. But let's see. Let me actually mark that out, make it easier. And let's go down to the 4 hour. Okay, so you see how the 4 hour gave you a buy signal way earlier? So it gave you the buy signal around July 21st. So that would be a really good buy signal because we know that we're finding support on a daily pivot. Okay, that daily pivot is creating a massive support. And what level is that? That level is 32.5. So when is that buy signal? That buy signal is 31.5. So that buy signal is a little early. You're still technically below the pivot. So we probably would have wanted to wait for either, say, an 8 hour or a 12 hour to see if we could get a buy signal above that pivot, breaking the pivot, right? Let's go to the 8 hour. The 8 hour gave you the buy around 32,000, so you're getting pretty close. The 12 hour gave you the buy at around 32,000. Okay, so this one, all the buy signals were going to be right on the pivot. So you would have had to make like a judgment call to anticipate that pivot break. Or you could have just waited for the daily to finally confirm the breakout of that pivot. But that is a really good example of how you can use the buy and sell signals with the pivots. Same thing with sell. So like if we have a pivot coming in on the top, and then maybe the daily starts to push into that pivot, and then it starts to sell off. If you were looking for a short entry, what are you going to do? You're not going to want to wait for the daily to sell because maybe it's going to sell down here, and you're going to miss that entire opportunity of that top. So what you can do is, we know there's a daily pivot here. We know that we're finding a little bit of resistance. So now we can look at the lower time frames to give us those sell signals to get in a little earlier. Okay, so maybe the 15 minutes starts to sell, and then you waterfall 30 minute, 1 hour, 4 hour. Okay, so then you have a really good entry for that short with a very small risk. Okay, but if you waited for the daily, you would have, say, taken the daily short a little late, and then your risk is much higher. Okay. So when you're hitting the pivots on the higher time frames, you want to be going down to the lower time frames to check how is the bot responding to those pivots. Okay. Another indicator that I like to use, obviously, is the Momo. So the Momo, if the trend line, so like if the trend line here, or you can use the shading, the same thing. If the trend line is above 10, or the shading is red, which means you're finding a top, quote unquote, the buy signals that are happening during that are going to be a higher strike rate. Okay. Now, a lot of the times, the buy signals are going to be happening earlier than that. That is okay. So like right here, the buy signal is happening before the Momo gets to that 10. Same thing here. The buy signal is happening before you get to the 10. Okay, so these are a little early, but when the Momo gets to being above 10 on the trend line, that's like a late confirmation that we can feel safe in these trends. Okay, it's kind of like the trend is catching up to you, and it's showing you that, yes, this is a bullish trend. So you are safe to hold on to this while the Momo is finding a top. Okay. You'll also find that you'll have moves like this, where you're already in a very strong uptrend. The Momo is already in the trend, and then you're getting buy signals. These signals will typically run past the buy signal as well. Now, this was a little choppier because we were finding a massive top here. This was actually a distribution. But like this, for example, here, you're finding a top already, and then look at these buy signals. These buy signals go for massive runs. Okay. So look for that. When the Momo is above 10, the buy signals are going to be stronger, and it will also give you late confirmation that your trend is strong. Same thing for the sell side. If the Momo is below negative 10 and the sell signals are coming in, that's kind of giving you more confluence that that trend is weak. Or the trend is strong, but it's bearish. Another part of the Momo that you can use is the histogram. So if you're in a buy signal and you're like well in profit and it's doing very well, if it begins to give you take profits and you're starting to lose momentum on the short-term Momo, that is kind of showing you that those take profits are finding strong resistance levels, and you're actually losing momentum on those levels. Okay, so like take this, for example, here. It gave you a bunch of take profits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 take profits relatively in the same area. And then look at the momentum. The momentum is pretty weak here. So this kind of told you that this little uptrend right here was not very strong. And then once the Momo confirmed it, once the Momo lost that trend, we also got a sell signal on the bot. So we were losing momentum. We were getting take profits. The Momo lost the high. These are all signals of a weak trend. Okay. But then you get the buy signal back, and then look at the momentum. You have that Momo pinch in that bullish direction. A buy signal with a Momo pinch is like the best thing you could ever ask for, because the Momo pinch is already one of the highest strike rate signals across all of our indicators. So if you have that Momo pinch, which looks like this, if you guys don't know what it looks like, it's when the trend line pinches together with the histogram. If it's going bullishly, that is a very bullish signal, and vice versa. So if we have a buy signal and a pinch, you're like, I don't want to say guaranteed, but it's like over 90% strike rate. It's going to go in that direction. Okay, it's very rare, but when it does happen, it's very, very high strike rate. So you're almost certain that this thing is going to break higher. Okay. The last indicator that I would recommend using with the bot is Ichimoku. I think I have it on here. No, I don't. Let me pull it up. So Ichimoku is probably one of the best free indicators to determine a trend. Let me get rid of some of these things, make them easier to see. So Ichimoku, if you guys are not familiar, I have a video on Ichimoku on my How to Trade playlist. So if you don't know what it is, I recommend go watch that video. But what it does is it basically gives you long-term trend and short-term trend. Okay. The cloud is like your longer-term trend. This is like your actual trend. What is your asset doing? Is it uptrending or downtrending on the grand scheme of things? Okay. And then it gives you these things that are like moving averages, the Kaijun line and the Tenkan line, also known as the conversion line and the baseline. These are like your short-term trend. Okay. When the Tenkan line or the conversion line is above the baseline, you are in an uptrend short-term, and vice versa. If these two trend lines are below Ichimoku, you're downtrending, and vice versa. If they're above Ichimoku, the cloud, you are uptrending. Okay. The cloud is also known as the Kumo. If you guys hear people say Kumo, that's what the cloud is. So if you're using this with the bot, use all those signals I just told you if it's uptrending or downtrending. If you get buy signals while you're uptrending, if you're above a green cloud, if you're above the Tenkan and Kaijun line, that is going to be a stronger buy signal, and vice versa. If you're below the cloud and it gives you a sell signal, that is going to be a stronger sell signal. Okay? This is a very good example because it gives you a sell signal, which is pretty decent. It actually goes for a pretty good sell-off, but then it instantly gets reversed because your overall trend is very bullish. So this sell signal was strong in the short term, but long term it was not. Okay. So then you quickly flipped back into a long-term bullish trend. Okay. Another good example is when you have signals like this on the bot. Maybe you're in a nasty range, and then the bot tries to break out of that range. You are clearly in a downtrend here. So this buy signal is going to be very weak. Okay. So if you would have taken that buy signal, you would have instantly lost. Given that it's a small loss, you would have still taken a loss. And then we have the signal here, which is very similar. You're ranging. It gives you a buy signal, but you're hitting kind of a bearish trend. This one just against the odds plays out. Okay. So that was actually a weak buy signal that turned into a very strong buy signal. And this is a good example of like, maybe if you were a little scared to take this buy signal because it is a weak buy, you can use those techniques that I went over in the beginning of the video as re-entry points. Okay. you could have used the waterfall technique on the lower time frames to get those re-entries. Okay, so maybe the daily goes into a buy, and then you begin to rip, and you're like, okay, this is actually turning into a strong buy. Then you could have looked at like the 4 hour, and you would have said, okay, we're in a sell signal, now we're flipping into a buy signal, and so on and so forth. You could have used the other time frames as well. But all right, guys, that was almost an hour-long video. Do you guys have any questions? I don't even think we're going to need another video. I think this is good enough to go over all the little tips that you guys need to know about. One final tip here. When you're using the bot, or any of the indicators for that point, right-click your scale and click Scale Price Chart Only. This will make your scaling a lot better. Sometimes it will, the bot or the OTS or any of the other indicators, they'll give you these levels, and it will make your chart kind of pinch itself together. It'll make your chart look really bad. So a tip for basically everything on TradingView, just turn on this Scale Price Chart Only button. The last tip is make sure that you guys are using the same candle colors on the body, or at least using black borders so it won't affect the candles. Because if you're using different colors, the borders will show up as the colors of the red and green candles, and it won't show up as the colors on the bot. And I talk about that in our quick start guide. If you guys haven't watched that little 3-minute video, make sure to go check that out. But all right, guys, I'm not seeing any questions, so we're going to close it down. I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to end the stream here as well, just to keep the video nice and short for YouTube. So we are going to end the stream a little early. But yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to hit that like button if you guys like the content. Make sure to subscribe if you guys are new. I do stream 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. If you guys are new to trading, make sure to check out my How to Trade playlist on YouTube. At this point, it's growing pretty rapidly. I think it's about 25 videos of content on different techniques that I use on stream. And I really think that it will benefit all of you guys, even if you're beginner traders, advanced traders. I think that playlist will help you all. So since we finished this video pretty quickly, later this week, I am going to be talking about our quant tower walkthrough. Okay. So I'll see you guys tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. You guys have a good day.